Just turn that down a little bit. Uh, going to be talking about maybe a little darker subject today, but one that I think is important for people to grasp if they're following this page, my content, or if they are of any kind of a religious bent and worried about what seems to be some very apocalyptic things that are happening around the world lately. The title of this talk is Tyranny is the Cardinal Karmic Sin. And what I'm going to be attempting to do in this segment is to help folks that say are coming from the traditional Christian, Jewish, Muslim background of understanding sin as things like breaking the Ten Commandments, breaking haram in the Islamic world, etc. Sharia law, it's the laws that have been given to us by our religion, and comparing that to my honest understanding of karma as basically the goddess of justice, of government of souls. And you can go through my other content to find out why I believe that, how I propose that karma developed in this system of reincarnation and karma herself. So a self-training, self-evolving system is what I tell you throughout my work is really going on here, and is the reason why we have so many religions and we keep replacing old religions with new religions and still finding them lacking until this time where everybody wants a new drug, a new religion, and nothing out there seems to be giving quite the same lift as before. I'm hoping that people will begin to listen to me and understand the integration of religion that I'm doing and why and how it will help them prepare for what's coming. Because, if you're in a tribe that is materialistic, you don't have spiritual beliefs, or you don't think the spirit is something that is outside the body. The folks that believe, you gotta go for it because you only live once. How many people have said that or thought that, even if they claim to be religious? This is a materialistic idea that rejects spiritual truth. And as far as spiritual truth goes, reincarnation and karma are spiritual truth. You can prove it to yourself. And you will prove it to yourself if you don't know it already. At any rate, so what is karmic sin? Okay, if you've been following my content about what's really going on with this whole experiment that we're involved in, the Gaia experiment, the human chosen species portion of it, you will understand that we're experiencing being in a test tube. A test tube that is working out all the bugs and details, fine-tuning the law of karma, using a species which was specifically designed to be a good test vehicle for that, and has been attracting souls of all ages and backgrounds, from the newest newbie soul, winked in as a stand-in virtual soul, into this universe from the other one, or some of the newer ones that are starting to manifest in this system, and work their way through this, what is essentially a game of souls. It's a training game, if you will, a training simulation. In this simulation, there are ways to go up levels and ways to put yourself on a path that gets you on a different track of specialization. And some of the specializations are very dark. And if you've been listening to recent episodes, you know that I call these dark paths the paths to the board universe. And this is why we're talking about tyranny. Okay, so let's get on to tyranny then. Why is that such a huge sin? Well, let's first define what tyranny is. Because, as usually is the case, the simplistic definitions that people are going to give to things are not all that useful and are very limited. So, at its core, most people, when they think of tyranny, think of, okay, this is a government or an organization or a person who has power, influence, authority, and uses that in a way that doesn't respect the autonomy, the sovereignty of others. So forces them to do things they don't want, think things they don't really think, not say what they really mean for fear of persecution, or the reverse, will say stuff to please the tyrant, to win favor, and to curry favor with the tyrant, which, is becoming a lapdog of a tyrant, which anybody who's familiar with any kind of a tyranny know that there are two sorts of people that are in the organizations that tyrants come to dominate. Now, where did this word originate? The word is a Greek word, and it comes from the age of Greek exploration with government. If you know anything about the Athenian democracy, the Athenian democracy was a result of reaction to the tyranny of the tyrant Philostratus, I think it was. Cleisthenes. I'll have to go back and look it up. At any rate, there was a tyrant of Athens who Athens had been, like most states, sort of a benevolent oligarchy ruled by a council of elders. And as the Greek states grew larger and more powerful and had a larger underclass that weren't part of the oligarchy, the oligarchs realized that they could gain power over their fellow oligarchs by currying favor with the people. And this is essentially how tyrants got started. They got started as demagogues before democracy. And they would just go to the public square and agitate people or conduct secret meetings, get a group of people together that were unhappy with how the oligarchy was being run under its, top leadership at the time, and cook up a rebellion and gain authority over these oligarchs, maybe kill a few of them, confiscate their property, and distribute it amongst the other people. And thus, by currying favor, getting more power over the other oligarchs. Well, the next idea that came after that was that one of these clever oligarchs said, well, I don't want to go the way of Pisistratus. That's the name, Pisistratus. I don't want to do that. I'm going to invent this thing, democracy, that openly creates power amongst all the citizens. Everybody gets a vote. And the old aristocratic oligarchy is going to be neutralized. Well, they'll still be kept as a council, maybe that has to approve the acts of the populace, but of course, who in their right mind is not going to approve something that's been acclaimed by the democracy? It's like signing your own death warrant to the guillotine, as folks that are familiar with the French Revolution know. Okay, so basically, the first democracy was a tyranny of the people. And under a benevolent tyrant, Pericles, this was very successful. And Pericles, if you don't know this name, was the main politician who sort of became the titular king, president, whatever. He was like the first citizen of the Athenian democracy. Everyone looked to him for guidance, kind of the George Washington of Athens, if you will. Okay, everything went really fine until inevitably Athens came under pressure from ostracized oligarchs that they had a scheme of, okay, anybody that makes trouble will have a vote, and we'll write names on pottery shards, put them in a pot, and then count them, and whoever gets the most names gets voted off the island. That's how they dealt with somebody that was creating trouble, to try to prevent a new tyrant from taking power. Well, what inevitably happened is tyrants did try to take power, tried to take over the public assembly and wean them with, pretty speeches and this and that of how they could lead them to better things than Pericles or whatever. And everybody loved Pericles so much, they would be voted off the island, and they would go become agitators in Athens' enemies. And this is how the rest of the Greek world got turned against Athens. And Sparta became, instead of a good friend, which they more or less were, especially during the first Persian invasion, they were planning on sending troops to help defeat the Persians. And it was only through a delay, a technicality, that their army didn't get to Marathon to help. And maybe that was already seeds of discord being sown between the two city-states. At any rate, tyranny goes back a long time. And it has, even then, clearer meaning than we think of. We think of a tyrant as a single person, a dictator, CEO. But in fact, there can be tyrannies of oligarchies, groups of people, groups of leaders. There can be tyrannies of cartels, groups of companies. There can be tyrannies of people, like happened during the French Revolution, when, especially the capital was basically ruled on a day-by-day basis by whoever shouted the most amongst a mob of citizens that were screaming for blood. And every day there would be executions of, oh, let's send them to the guillotine now, we hate them. And whoever screamed the loudest would get to send 100 or 200 of their worst enemies to the guillotine. And eventually they ran out of the people that everybody hated, and they had to start turning against each other. And this is how what started as a noble revolution turned into absolute chaos, to the point that the whole mess was destabilized, to the point that somebody like a Napoleon Bonaparte, this obscure Corsican lieutenant, wasn't even French. Bet you didn't know that. Somehow rose to power and became emperor of the French. And from, a revolution to end monarchy, they got an empire. And they got a warmongering general that tried to conquer Europe. This is how tyranny works. And it's not the simple thing that many people think it is. And I'm going to explain the complexities of tyranny and help you understand the multiple levels of tyranny that you may not be aware of. So, we just talked about political tyranny. There are other forms of tyranny we see. One of them is cultural tyranny, which is essentially what happens with what we call now cultural Marxism, where a certain group of elite or people who make the records choose what books are kept, what books are burned, how books are changed and modified over time. That's a form of intellectual tyranny, cultural tyranny. Those who make their name, make their fortunes by setting fashions and denouncing, replacing, defeating other fashions in the arts, in fashion, in music, whatever. This is a form of tyranny. And so, like music executives, movie producers, the executives of the big movie studios, the executives of the big media corporations are tyrants in both senses of the word, because they exert a corporate tyranny over their employees, and they exert this intellectual tyranny over the production of content, which is then going to be consumed and popularized by advertising. Okay, so that's another aspect of tyranny that you may not have considered at this point. But there's much more. Because if you've listened to my podcast, read my books, you would know that, in fact, souls inhabit everything. Anything you can give a name to, any organization of cells, of atoms, whatever, has a soul, an oversoul. Now, some oversouls represent groups of things. So, like, while you might have a small soul for each individual hydrogen atom, there's an oversoul that represents the idea of hydrogen and is sort of in charge of, well, somebody's doing a new experiment that involves hydrogen and they've never made this measurement before. What are the quantum results of that measurement? And hydrogen, as one of the participants, has a very vocal say in what happens. Much more influential than maybe the individual particle or atoms involved. That there will be a consensus, and the measurement will conclude, oh, well, this chemical reaction or this particle interaction works this way because most of the time this is what happens. But statistically, there are these other things that happen, and that leads to new discoveries. This is how new particles are discovered, new compounds are discovered, new properties of different compounds are discovered. And this process is a spiritual process. Scientists, unwittingly, even though they think they may be atheists, are doing spiritual work. Their inspirations are leading them to do experiments which produce results, and this is what creates new truths, or may replace old ones, depending on, okay, the experiment was done this way before, but we didn't take into account this, this, and this, and when you add these new nuances to the experiment, you get different results, more complicated results that require maybe more complicated or a more universal theory to explain. Okay, so what are some of the other levels of tyranny this brings up? Well, the human body is the sole purview of one soul. The human incarnated soul is actually the oversoul of the whole body. And there are other oversouls that are in charge of the different organs, the heart, the brain being the two most vocal of these. But the other organs each have their own consciousness, their own knowledge of how they're supposed to operate, how things are supposed to be, and they make decisions about what happens when something isn't going the way I expected. Just like a human being would do who's involved in a corporation or a country or a political party. Everyone's doing an experiment on data all the time. Every time you observe something and you change your mind, or you change how you feel about it, it becomes more nuanced, you are essentially a scientist. And this is why I attack the idea of critical thinking so much, because critical thinking is unscientific. Adding criticism to thinking says that you're going into your thinking with a bias, with something that you think is wrong, that needs to be fixed or replaced. And this is a Marxist idea. And Marx didn't create it. He just is one of the ones that made it into a weapon of mass distortion of minds. So, the human body, the human incarnated soul, is the leader, the oversoul of the whole body. But these other souls have their own say in what's going on. Individual cells will decide to give up the ghost and die when they are stressed too much, when it's like, I can't take this life anymore. And this is how substance abuse diseases begin. Diseases of the liver, diseases of the brain, the heart, etc. When part of your body, one of these little oversouls, decides, you know what, I'm not getting treated well. This bastard that's running me is being a tyrant. I keep saying that I'm stressed, I'm in pain, I'm hurting, I'm feeling like I'm going to die, and the bastard doesn't listen to me. And eventually, organs will effectively commit suicide. And this is the truth of disease. This is why any true doctor, any true healer, will admit that there is a spiritual component to disease and healing. And that it does make a difference how you feel about your illness, how you process your illness with your human consciousness, which is not your body. It's not your brain. Anyone that tells you all you got to do is read the right manual, take the right drug, that we've filled your brain with the idea of, is a liar. At least a teller of half-truths. Because the same medication applied to all the people that have a certain set of symptoms is not going to work in all cases. It's going to make some people worse. This is why almost all medications have side effects. It's going to make some people better, and some people, well, it didn't really help at all. And that's only the short-term effects. Because the long-term effects can take, these alien things that we introduce that bother our body, they may not complain for a while. They may say, well, gosh, I'm not happy with this, but oh, well, I'll let it go, because mostly my oversoul has done pretty good stuff for me, pretty much listens. I'll just kind of toe the line for now. And this is how tyrants are enabled. And it leads to another form of tyranny that you may not be aware of, need to understand. That this same thing happens with the organizations that indoctrinate our children. Because the brain is very programmable. It is a programming device. The consciousness is the soul. And the brain can program the consciousness, because the brain is the interface between your observing organs and your soul, that is the ultimate processor of what do I do. If you're actively thinking, if you're consciously thinking about something, that's who makes the decision. But everybody knows that you can do things unconsciously, and that's what happens if you let for instance, the brain, control you. If you let the brain be your tyrant, if you let the heart be your tyrant, you are abdicating your kingship to this underling, this prime minister, whoever you choose, and letting them make your decisions for you. And many people are on that kind of an autopilot. And that's not healthy either, because what's good for the heart may not be good for the brain or the whole body. What's good for the brain may not be good for the whole body. And certainly what's good for the sexual organs may not be good for anybody. And anybody that, has had to deal with somebody that has sexual disorder, emotional disorder, I'm not talking about venereal disease, that has some sort of sex-related mental condition, knows just how damaging that can be to the whole body, to the body politic, the people around them, the families, and so forth. It's very, very dark. And it is, to the extent that it allows the sexual organs to decide that they know better than the rest of the body what's good for them. This can be, obsessive sex. This can be an obsession with rape fantasies. This can be an obsession with wanting to be the different sex, being dissatisfied with having a penis or a vagina. And to the extent that those feelings of that undersoul become dominant over everything else, the best understanding you can come up with your brain, or what you feel from your heart, they all negotiate a solution. And everybody has been in a space in their life where they have felt conflicted. My head says this, my heart says that, but oh, I'm so attracted to her. Have you ever had that three-way discussion? Or the discussion that you have with your respiratory system. You're a smoker and you develop a hacking cough, and your lungs are not able to breathe enough air as they used to, and they're telling you, hey, something is wrong here. And whoever's getting the nicotine rush says, hey buddy, don't worry about it, I can't live without my nicotine. Same thing happens with alcohol. Now, not everybody has that problem. There are people who smoke all their lives and never develop lung cancer, never develop serious respiratory problems. It's true. My mother was one of them. Smoked all her life, like a chimney. Luckily, she went outside to smoke after my dad quit. But she lived to a ripe old age of 80-something, and smoking was not part of her story of getting to the end of that life. Same thing with alcohol. Some people can drink every day, large quantities. In certain cultures, it's almost the norm. And some of them, yes, it does cause health problems, because the liver says, hey buddy, I can't hack this anymore, you got to stop. And it tells you very vocally that it's unhappy. And, you have to decide which of those voices you want to listen to. Oh, but my head really enjoys the calm feeling I get. Or, this is how you can have addictions of the head, you can have addictions of the heart, you can have addictions of different parts of the body that get to have dominance over the whole soul, the human soul, in decision making. And this is the challenge of being human. And yes, the soul, the human incarnated soul, can be the tyrant, or it can be the victim of another tyrant. And this is why I say tyranny is the cardinal sin, but a secondary sin is letting yourself be victimized by a tyrant. because that is abdicating the power you have to choose not to go along with the tyrant. Now, some people say, well, I don't always have a choice. Well, you certainly do have a choice with, at least most of us do, with what you put in your body. Okay? You have a choice within a certain range of consuming food that you know is unhealthy, that contains additives that are questionable, and consuming food that your body likes better, that it feels better when you eat. And if you actually get to know your body well, which is what a good leader of any organization does, that doesn't want to be a tyrant, you listen to them. You try out this. Okay, well, things aren't going so well. I don't have a lot of energy. Who's got this problem? Let's try, maybe, they say that this could be caused by this or this. Let's try cutting something out of my diet. See if it gets better. Or go to, one of the doctors that is good at detecting what you're allergic to. And this is exactly what I did at about age 40. And my body was telling me that I was really messing with it, whatever I was doing. And it was true. I was very, very unhappy in my marriage, in my career. My kids were driving me crazy, and I was having no time to spend on any of the things I was really passionate about. And my life was just, what did I do to get into this? And I knew exactly what I did. I tried to please my parents. They had certain expectations of, what you were supposed to study, what kind of job you're supposed to get, the house in the suburbs with 2 kids, this perfect fantasy American life. I had the fantasy, but the reality was not satisfying at all. I mean, it was satisfying. I had great kids, and there was really nothing wrong with my wife except that we weren't a very good match. And I don't want to get into that, but something was missing, and it was causing problems, and it was causing me to get into bad habits of eating. I was, compared to now, I think I had maybe 65, 70, 80 pounds more than I do now. I had asthma, beginnings of type 2 diabetes, and a habit of drinking way too much beer and wine. So I went to this naturopathic doctor who did this new therapy that had come out of India that actually looked at how substances cause electromagnetic weaknesses in the body. And to this day, many people think that is pure fantasy voodoo stuff, what they do. But he would put various substances in my hand and then see if I could hold my arm up with the same amount of force as he pushed down against it. And there was no doubt that certain substances made my body weaker. And this is part of the story of what I'm telling you about, and because it's not only electromagnetic energy, but spiritual energy that can weaken us or strengthen us. So we do have an innate power to control our energy, but it's dangerous because if you talk, you think of, for instance, there's a large tribe of people that are very motivated around a so-called law of attraction, where they use brain control, brain programming, to artificially tell themselves they're in a good mood or they're going to get things, to attract what I want to me. I'm going to attract my soulmate. I'm going to attract wealth and prosperity. And If it works, of course, they think they're geniuses, but these are very dangerous techniques because they're based upon basically lying and doing a prayer in a way that's inconsiderate of what's being affected. Okay, this because anything you do with your brain is something your brain has decided to do. It's not really going to feed your soul. Okay, programming brains is what the evil forces around you, the tyrants around you who are good at brain programming, try to do. And if you do it yourself, all you're doing is creating another tyrant. Either by programming your brain or letting your brain take over and force a program on your body that it's seen, oh, I really like what this guy's saying. I blah 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 blah. I'm gonna bow down to his religion and put myself on this macrobiotic diet, and everything is gonna be perfect. And my older brother did that and forced his whole family to be macrobiotics for decades, and was absolutely certain it was making him the most healthy person in the world, and it wasn't. They were having health problems. In fact, his wife of many years developed very serious cancer under this so-called perfect diet, the perfect way of thinking that he was trying to impose on his family. And yes, my brother, if you're listening to me, you're a tyrant. And that's why all your family left you. And you deserved it. This is karma. And that's why tyranny, this is a personal situation that backs up my assertion that tyranny is the cardinal karmic sin. I've seen it all around me. And in every case that fits. And in every case, karma does come back eventually to deal a devastating blow to the tyrant. Now, what's another level of tyranny? That's kind of going down the lower level of tyranny that happens in your body. Well, we talked a little bit about tyranny in relationships. I gave you a good example of that. Narcissism, as it applies to relationships, is a tyranny. The narcissist has a fantasy view of reality, and if that fantasy view isn't matched by actual reality in relationships, the narcissist projects what's not working onto their mate. And either in the case of a overt narcissist, projects it in terms of violence and anger and controlling manipulative behavior, or in the case of a covert narcissist, manifests it by, the victim playing the victim. Oh, I did everything for him, and then he went and cheated on me. Well, in some cases that may be true, but not in all cases. And, anyone who comes out of a relationship and sees it from a very one-sided point of view, why it failed, who was at fault, what was going on, and only sees it from one side, is a potential tyrant. And you can see it in how such people raise their children, because they inflict that tyranny on their children. The controlling spouse becomes the helicopter parent that has to be in telling the child what they can do, when they can do it, constantly critical of any failure, constantly pushing them towards the goal that they want. This is a parent as a tyrant, and it's a very ugly thing to see. That can work the other way too. I've seen very passive parents let their children tyrannize them. And this happens very frequently with parents that kind of have been raised on this new age, oh, we've got to have unconditional love for everything, and then everything will be perfect. And you take a child that has a fairly alpha personality and give them unconditional love and don't punish them for doing bad things, they'll do worse things and worse things and worse things until somebody gets in their way. And they might learn their lesson when somebody finally punishes them for doing something they did, but it's by that time maybe they're stealing or doing drugs or whatever in high school, raping girls or accusing boys of rape because they didn't do what they wanted. These things. And this is what happens when you enable preformed children who have a soul, yes, and the soul sometimes has a lot of experience. And you can raise some souls in environments like that and they'll turn out just fine, because an experienced soul instinctively knows how to process situations like that and has a natural instinct for karma, for what is right and wrong. And others don't. And this is another fallacy of a lot of the parenting advice you get, which is in itself is a form of tyranny. Anybody that says, I know the right way to raise your child, I can help you find your soulmate in 5 easy lessons. This is tyranny. This is a tyranny of the mind. It's making a false claim and marketing it. And that is an attempt to become a tyrannical person. So this is another way. I mean, I can get to almost anything that you might think of as negative behavior, as sin, as bad karma, and I can tie it to some dimension of tyranny, or subscribing to tyranny, which is enabling it, which is not as bad as a sin as being the tyrant, but the enablers actually end up being the ones that let tyrants keep tyrannizing. This is why we have a communist government in China that is still in power after killing at least 100 million of its citizens that we know of in absolutely unnecessary ways, and who is doing the same thing right now with their zero COVID policy lockdowns and their insane way that they're treating people with those white people in the hazmat suits that are really police or military. They're finding out. Yep, today's news was these lovely white figured helpers in the hazmat suits. They're not doctors and nurses. They're policemen and army, and they know nothing about the virus. They know crowd control, and there are videos out all over the place of them brutalizing people, of doing absolutely absurd things that don't make any medical sense to people's homes. After they quarantine them, they go through their homes and completely ransack them, claiming that they're disinfecting them. Steal all the valuables, steal any useful food, just totally trash the places, maybe because the people looked like they were a little bit richer than their family and they were resentful. I don't know what goes through these people's minds, but it is tyrannical in one sense or another. So let's move up then to the highest level, because there is higher level spiritual tyranny. Because beings of a higher consciousness, higher spiritual abilities can become tyrants too. And this is why I also criticize those who believe in a supreme almighty authoritarian God. There is a deity like that, a being, a spiritual being called Borg, who is like the chief adversary of the real God, who is not a tyrant. The real God is a spiritual scientist, invented the art of spiritual science, how to create responsibly, how to create a healthy family of souls, how to give them a government by which they could train new souls and also remedially deal with old souls that had become tyrants. This is what reincarnation is, along with karma. And because of free will, you can't just force this new law onto every soul without reneging on a promise that every soul would have free will. And what would happen? What would be the conclusion of that? Well, God is a tyrant. God can, in fact, do that. You cannot exert tyranny without using dark powers that have inherent karma. No being that knows about karma, that understands it, would do that because they don't want to have such dark karma that they never get to enjoy a new incarnation. There are some very dark old souls watching what's going on this planet. And some of them are like, gosh, I really want to get in the game because for all the bad things I've done, it's nowhere near as bad as what the Borg team is doing right now. And they're just like, do I want to face karma? If God could do it, I can do it. And these souls are coming. And you know, people that have been studying, one phenomena that you should probably take a look at is the indigo kids. There are many children in especially the latest generation that have these memories of a life that was very different than human existence. And if you look at the researches of past life regression therapists like Dolores Cannon, you'll find that during the course of her work, she started finding that the kind of memories that were coming back in her sessions were very different. They were shifting from, you know, very mundane human history, past life experiences to these weird, possibly alternate future or real future type experiences of some kind of a Star Trek kind of universe of going around and bringing some sort of a new culture to people. And, you know, maybe some of that is wishful thinking brought on by popular media, because that does happen. And there are some of these practitioners who do work hypnosis, like classical hypnosis, by suggestion. And they will actually put ideas in which aren't there. It's just not the way that past life regression hypnosis is supposed to work. It's a very light hypnosis that allows the subject to direct and only gives very broad general directions of what their mind might want to concentrate on, might want to focus in. And anyone who's been through these sessions can tell the difference, or heard recordings of them. You can tell the difference between a practitioner that's doing it because they have an agenda and the one that is doing it because they actually want to help people and they want to follow the actual recommendations and tenets of Dolores Cannon. At any rate, so this is the thing you need to be watchful for. There are many people preaching that they understand what's going on from a spiritual standpoint. And to the extent that they are getting popularized, making a lot of money, getting invited to talk on every single show because, oh, I love to hear them talking. Boy, I don't know. You got to be real careful with those folks because they are going down the road of becoming intellectual, spiritual tyrants. It's very, very appealing to when you start beginning to have an idea of what your role is. If you found a spiritual role in this event, it's very tempting to try to push things. And I've certainly gone through that temptation myself with my spiritual awakening, and it can lead to some very, very dark nights, and can lead you to, a narcissistic use of the spiritual gifts that you've been given, the revelations you've been given. And if you fall down that path, as I mentioned, even Jesus did, if there was a historical Jesus, or if it was an amalgam of several characters, the story that remains in the New Testament is one of a failed prophet, not a successful prophet. I've done a detailed talk on that, so I'm not going to go into it, but you got to be real careful in these days and not let anybody exert any kind of tyranny over you. And the tyranny of the fairy good witch who tells you that everything is fine, you just gotta, this isn't reality. You're gonna be one of the New Earth crowd that goes to the New Earth. You just have to think high vibes. You need to do this. This is bullshit. I'm sorry. It's absolute bullshit. You don't get to advance in God's universe without opposing tyranny. You don't get to advance in God's universe by being a tyrant. And you don't get to advance without opposing tyranny where you see it. If you see a tyrant in action, you call him out. You don't murder them. Murdering them leads to more tyranny. You don't want to kill all your enemies. You want to expose them for the tyrannies that they are exerting on people. You want to open people's eyes to the fact that they may be falling into the hole of a tyrannical cult. And anybody who knows the history of some of the cults whose leaders have exerted the tyranny that would lead them all to commit mass suicide because the so-called event was here and we're all gonna go, boys. This has happened many times all over the world throughout our history. This is the kind of really dark place that spiritual tyrants can take you to. Things like the Crusades or Islamic jihads are the work of tyrants, spiritual tyrants, not servants of the real God. I'm sorry. That's just the truth of the matter. If that's the kind of God you believe in a tyrant. You believe in a Borg God. And that's not going to get you to the heaven you think you're going to. You must oppose tyranny, not violently, but by exposing, by questioning, by trying to open people's minds to the fact that, gosh, it sounds like you're kind of in a cult. And this is what's essentially going on politically in the U.S. Folks are finally realizing that, wow, this fake left that's developed, this so-called liberal progressive left, is a cult. It's got a bunch of beliefs and values that are completely at odds with human nature, with natural sex, at odds with almost everything. I mean, up is down, good is bad, right is wrong. It's all topsy-turvy, and this is absolutely how the tyranny of cultural Marxism works, and it is a tyranny. It's got to the point in China where you've got people now finally waking up after watching their neighbors being hauled off and disappeared for decades and not saying anything, not even questioning, gosh, what happened to that Tibetan family that moved next to us? that Uyghur family, that Mongolian family, that Miao people family, that nice Falun Gong family. You're getting your karma. Maybe not as bad as will happen to the leaders of that Marxist dystopia. But if you went along with it and you didn't say anything when you saw tyranny in action, you take some of that guilt. You get some of that karma. And this is how karmic sin works. It's not simple like the Ten Commandments. It's not simple like following Sharia law. Those were approximations in the era of what the prophets or the interpreters of prophets thought was going to be useful for organizing society at that time. And it didn't include karma. Why? I don't know. Maybe they didn't like the way the Hindus had misused karma. Maybe they didn't like the way the Buddhists had turned karma into like something you were trying to escape from instead of something that was going to help you learn about yourself. There's no religion throughout history that doesn't bear some of the guilt for where our species is at. And there is no new religion or anti-religion that that has solved this problem. Communism isn't the solution. Atheism isn't the solution. Social Darwinism is not a solution. Libertine commercialism is not a solution. Eat, drink, and be merry, for the tomorrow we may die is a choice. It's not a solution. If you take that attitude and just, well, I'm going to do whatever the fuck because we're all in shit, right? Okay, this is a cop-out. You're not making any effort to learn from this experience, this incarnation that you had, that you chose. And yes, we do choose to some extent our incarnations, not everything. You can't choose everything, but you have little choices like depending on your level. If you've been coming to the human species for a while, you might get a choice of, well, there's a family that's expecting a baby. And the baby doesn't attract to the soul yet. Only about, the fetus is only about 2-3 months old. Everything looks healthy. The parents, here's a little bit of what they look like in life, what their marriage looks like, their family, etc. How about that one? And being offered that, or maybe they'll offer you a choice of families to be incarnated in. Maybe in different time periods, different species, whatever. That all depends on what the heaven you're at, the level you're at, thinks is a reasonable thing to offer you. And those heavenly souls who are offering you your choices are not God. They are in training too. They're just living a spiritual incarnation as, one of the work staff of one of these heavens, which is how you kind of get to the next level of the game. You start by spending most of your time in physical incarnation, and then eventually you get to the point where you get up there and your advisors will say, you've been doing really good in so many lives. I think maybe would you like to take a chance and stay up here for a while? Maybe become an advisor? Maybe be my replacement. I've been your advisor, but they said I was doing really good for the work I did with you, and I get to move up. Do you want to take my place? It's always a choice. And this is how souls advance from the lowest 4 levels of consciousness to the medium 4 levels of consciousness, the level of the spirit levels, and maybe if they are really diligent and good students and don't develop a lot of tyrannical habits, they might move into the God levels again. But there are many old souls who are very, very powerful at one time who will never, ever, ever get to be a god again. And this is why Borg is so scared. This is why this planet has not had those visitors for a long time. They're scared as fuck of coming here because they've seen what karma has done to some of their brothers and sisters in crime. They didn't come back. They're stuck going through incarnation, or if they ever get back to the God level, they're so dark that they are stuck in the prison part of Earth. And this is the truth that's in the Bible. This is why the Bible talks of the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible. Why? There's all these dark gods stuck inside the containment field inside the earth, who on the day of judgment will finally get to go to Borg's universe. They'll get to transition because their karma is so against what's in God's universe that they are going to be propelled from it the moment that they are released with a death from their current incarnation, which is what's going to happen on the day of judgment. And those souls will be replaced by virtual souls, which have all their experience, all their knowledge, but are a zero-level new soul that has to earn full free will through finishing this incarnation, having to make the what would God do choice in every situation. And this is the magic that is about to happen. And it may not be obvious to you because it's not going to be chariots of fire and blah, 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 all this crap from Ezekiel or the book of Revelations. But all of a sudden, and you're already seeing it, frankly, you're going to be seeing strange spiritual shifts. Something you thought was, God, this is hopeless. We'll never get out of this. So many people are so confused. And all of a sudden, there'll be a sea change. Some event will just... And this is what's going on with the pandemic. It was definitely planned by dark souls who wanted to cause fear and chaos and turn more people to the dark side. But it's actually having the opposite effect. People are saying, you know what? I don't want that to happen again. I don't want to be tyrannized by a government that is so out of touch with the reality of a disease that they would make the response to the disease worse than the disease. That they have such a vested interest in profiteering from the disease through insider trading or whatever, that they would actively promote cures for the disease that aren't cures, that they would essentially force media companies to redefine the word vaccine, redefine the word herd immunity, not only on Wikipedia, but every other dictionary online, and begin the process of removing books from libraries and replacing them with ones that are different, or just never replacing them. And I've been telling you in recent episodes how both myself and other people have been finding that things that we thought we will remember, oh, this such and such a movie had such a good example of this or that. You go back and look for it, it's not there. Arnold Schwarzenegger movie True Lies from the 80s disappeared. This is not a low-selling movie that would never be rented. Don't give me that bullshit argument. Well, that old stuff nobody watches. This is a movie that would be appealing to anybody because it tells the story. It's a very funny story about a CIA agent who's got family troubles. And he has to keep his identity secret. He's, spy guy. And so he's got this alternate life where he's constantly going, to kill a bunch of people and then come back and have to remember to put his right wedding ring on, or put his wedding ring on the right finger, because sometimes he masquerades where they wear the wedding ring on the other side, as I do now in Muslim country. It's really funny, but it points out that yes, you can misuse technology. You can become a tyrant within your own organization by using its technology against everybody else. And that's essentially what's going on in many of the social media companies. The lunatics are controlling the asylum. You've got partisan political hacks forcing a tyranny on their companies through threats. This is the dark side of the Twitter story. This is the dark side of the Netflix story. I'm not saying that those companies' leadership were great. By far, they weren't. And they've gone downhill as the tyrants forced their original founders out. But this is absolutely why I'm talking about you and talking about it in terms of tyranny. Tyranny is the cardinal sin. I don't care what your religion is, where you know, if you believe that there is any kind of divine retribution, if there is any karma, I'm telling you, look for tyranny, and you're going to see the people getting the worst end of the stick and deserving it. Look for those who comply with tyranny, who aid and abet tyranny, who go along with the bully. They're heading for a very dark place in the next incarnation, and they deserve it. They merit it. That's how the system is going to teach them the error of their ways. This is the truth behind the simplistic idea of heaven and hell. There are many heavens, and some of them operate like hell for some souls within them. This is truth. Just like there are many corporations. Some corporations are run well, and people love to work at them, and they feel engaged and happy and blah, blah, blah. They don't live in a tyranny. There are other corporations which are rotting at the seams, and people just can't wait to get out. And it's not necessarily because of the management. It may be because of the culture. And culture is as much established by the people as it is by management. So, you know, you don't get an out by saying, well, I didn't know I was being programmed by all these Netflix series and by social media. I'm just an innocent bystander here. Sorry, you were aiding and abetting. To the extent that you didn't ask questions before you shared a hate meme, before you shared a half-truth, before you shared a complete fake news lie without actually going to check anybody but PolitiFact or the fact checkers that are paid by the fact checks, you are culpable. You're not as guilty as the ones paying for the deception, controlling minds, but you are guilty for being a controlled mind. Okay, and this is the other piece of what I'm telling you. The folks that are really off the deep end, that are really hardcore servants of the dark side, when they die, they are not going to be needed on planet Earth. And they're not going to be needed in God's universe, because there are already plenty of dark souls that haven't worked their way through karma. They're going to take this new version of karma they've been infected with, and they're going to be incarnated in the Borg universe, on the Borg planet, the Borg Earth, the other Earth. And they're going to cause holy havoc there, because they're going to be feeling what it's like to go through a life knowing about karma, absolutely being conscious of it, because that's what happens. When you wink out, you have this feeling, that this deja vu feeling of uh, what we call the Mandela effect. There's kind of a shimmering or something like that, and the world suddenly seems different. And many people will not have a conscious idea that something has shifted. But if you have any kind of a higher consciousness, you will know that, oops, I must have messed up in the universe I was in. And you'll think about what you did. And this is what happens between lives. When you reincarnate, you don't immediately choose a new incarnation. Well, sometimes it gets chosen for you. That is one of the versions of the atheist heaven. If you really absolutely don't want to believe in anything, okay, we'll just reincarnate you, throw the dice, and you can be, oh, poop. You're born in this soul now, and good luck, sucker. Maybe one of these days you'll wake up to the fact that you've had more than one life. But these really dark souls wouldn't get in the positions of power and influence they had if they didn't have some of this latent spiritual energy, this magnetism already. So these very dark people who have been setting things up, they're either old gods who have come in as agents to this planet and had to get infected with karma and thus be isolated here. Or, like I said, they're the ones that got so advanced that, okay, they reached God level again. We can't let them out to do havoc anymore, so we imprison them until the day of judgment. So most of the worst riffraff is going to be going off to the board universe. The rest of it is mostly going to be going to the parts of this galaxy, this universe, that are kind of board strongholds or areas that are under contention. And their souls will be introducing karma, the new version of karma, to those places. So the Day of Judgment is effectively going to be not only a victory for God's side, but basically the start of the next phase of the war. And it's not really a war because we don't fight with weapons of destruction. We fight with weapons of enlightenment, self-enlightenment, self-determination. This is what reincarnation and karma are. They don't force you to do anything. They set up a system of choices that you can learn from. Learn about yourself, learn about others, make your choices, and decide your path. And if you want to go down the dark path, more power to you. Because eventually, everyone that's chosen the dark path will be stuck in a dark universe that is rapidly moving away from the lighter universes. This is how the real law of attraction works at a macro scale. At a universal scale, when souls advance enough to be gods, they're aware of having their own universe, and they're able to manifest their own universe more or less permanently. This is what the God level is. This is why they have more power, more consciousness. At the lower levels, your universe may only wink in shortly while you avoid making a mistake in God's universe that might have taken a life that was needed for an important experiment that was going on for the plan, for God's plan, or some other more advanced soul that was getting close to finishing their experiment, and only just had a few more tests to run. You wouldn't want that spiritual scientist to be set back by centuries or millennia by one stupid asshole not paying attention to their driving. So when that stupid asshole is about to cause this accident, they wink out to their own universe. The accident happens, they experience it, and they get a replacement soul in God's universe that doesn't have the accident. And that replacement soul is a new soul, a new level 0 soul, what I call a virtual soul. And they carry on with that person's life as if nothing had happened. They essentially have all their memories, have all of their essence. The only thing that's changed, being a level 0 soul, is you have limited free will for that one incarnation. And only to the extent that you don't get to make your normal choices in any case where a greater plan is involved, where you're going to upset the plans of a higher level soul. And it works that way. When this infects Borg's universe, it will work that way too. And Borg's plans will wink souls over here who are upsetting Borg's plan. And this is how we'll exchange prisoners back and forth until they all learn to play nicely with each other. Or they decide, you know what, I like conflict. I like to be an evil asshole. And they will end up in one of the Borg universes forever. And fine, let them go do whatever they want to each other. It's not bothering anybody that it matters, because they all deserve it. At any rate, I hope this has taught you something that you didn't know about karma and sin, and where you might be headed in the near future. If you'd like to learn more, please tune in to more episodes of the Honest Hour. Like, share, subscribe, interact, debate before it's too late. This is Rob Trump with the Honest Hour. Thank you.